Schadenfreude, everybody must have screamed, ah! He's a sung hero. A little pushy. Are you back from listening to Stairway to Heaven twice? Now, those are just words I looked up on the internet.
Unreasonable Down, a podcast about West Virginia University basketball, starts now.
Hello. From the studio in Nitro, West Virginia, this is Unreasonable Down. It's a podcast about West Virginia University basketball, part of the Basketball Podcast Network. I'm Josh Witt. This is episode 15, and West Virginia lost their first must-win game tonight. They lost at home to Kansas, 76-62. Kansas sitting at number 3 in the AP poll. I believe Purdue lost earlier this week. Houston may be number 1, but Kansas will have a case for number 1. It's a human poll. It doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter. But what matters is how good Kansas is, and they are really good. How did they do that? How did they win the national championship, lose a number of guys to the NBA, and still look like that? How did they do it? How do they not miss a shot? Remember when West Virginia was not missing shots? I remember. I may have said some things on this podcast. This team has the possibility to be the best offensive team that Huggins has ever had. Things are coming back down to earth in a rapid way. And this conference will do that. Don't get me wrong. But also, I mean, look at it. 76 in an overtime game versus Kansas State. 60 in Stillwater, and you barely break 60. Listen, this game was never in doubt for Kansas. I mean, West Virginia cut it to 5, I think, late in the second half, but it was like a predator animal toying with its food, like playing with it, like a big cat, just toying around, just pawing at it. I've got you. I'm going to eat you, but I can mess around a little bit. That's how good Kansas was tonight. I mean, you can see it with 6 minutes left. The Kansas players talking to each other, like not clowning West Virginia, but obviously caring very little about what was happening because they had it in hand. It was not in doubt. And so what do you do with this result? Again, what I would argue, this was a must-win game, so you get more than one must-win game. That's how it's weird. You would think a must-win game means there's only one of them. And I would argue you get a number of must-win games. I remember last year keeping track of how many must-win games West Virginia had. But we're here again, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But kudos to Kansas. I don't know how they do it. And the Big 12 Conference, in my mind, West Virginia's at home, sold-out crowd. Kansas is coming all the way from Lubbock. Their last game was in Lubbock. They didn't lose that game, so you don't get Kansas coming off of a loss. West Virginia losing a couple of games, get to come back home. No, it's not ideal to try to get right versus a top 5 team in the country. But I did convince myself that at least it was going to be a close game, and it was not. It was never close. And Kansas finishes the game shooting 42%, but they made a ton of threes. And West Virginia struggled on offense. I'm talking in circles. And this conference, there's been 15 games where a Big 12 team plays another Big 12 team. And 10 of those 15 games, the road team has won. Unfortunately, West Virginia accounts for 2 of the Big 12's home wins, with Kansas State beating West Virginia at home and Oklahoma State beating West Virginia at home. But you look at the results today, Texas, they went to Oklahoma State and they beat them 56-46. I turned that game on with a little over 3 minutes left in the first half and watched until halftime. Nobody scored a point. It was really good defense from both teams. Obviously, Texas, you hate to play Texas coming off a game where they gave up 116 because they are good at defense despite giving up 116. And so they proved that in Stillwater, holding Oklahoma State to under 50. Iowa State goes to Fort Worth on that stupid-looking court and gets a 3 late and beats TCU. Iowa State is 3-0 in the Big 12. Kansas State goes to Baylor. Jalen Bridges made a shot to send that game to overtime, but Kansas State pulls it out, and they're 3-0 in the Big 12, and they get a road win. And then Oklahoma, who lost their first 2 games at Norman, goes to Lubbock, which historically has been a tough place to win, and they beat the Red Raiders in overtime, 68-63. So 5 Big 12 games a day, 5 road victories. And West Virginia has played Kansas, who was 3-0 in the conference, and Kansas State, who was 3-0 in the conference. So I don't know what to do from here. Bob Huggins, he's using fix-it language already. I thought I had it fixed, and I don't have it fixed. Don't give up on the team. Don't give up on us. Kedrian Johnson did not play in this game. He was in concussion protocol. Jose Perez, still no decision with him. And so Joe Toussaint started, and he did okay, but he didn't. I don't know. I mean, what do you want me to tell you? I guess I talked about this some last year in the rationalization department, but just logically, because this conference is amazing. The top of this conference is really good, and the bottom of this conference is not bad. I mean, it's a solid. I don't know who's arguing a conference is better than the Big 12 from one to your worst team. And I talked about this last year. West Virginia was last in the Big 12, but they were the best worst team in a conference, according to computers and whatnot. And so I'll ask again, and I'm not saying this is true for West Virginia, but in theory, putting no names with teams, if you are the worst team in a 10-team conference, but you are the 10th best team in the country, so like you're the worst in a conference, but you're better than everybody else, your record, you could lose all 18 games in conference and in theory still be the 10th best team. This sounds like an SEC football podcast. I'm making an SEC argument here. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that West Virginia is the 10th best team in the country, but it seems like they're at the bottom of this conference 3 games in, and they're tied for 8th with 2 other 0-3 teams. Baylor is 0-3. That's a weird sentence to say. And Texas Tech is 0-3. A little less weird, but still weird. But somebody's got to be 0-3. Are you saying Texas Tech is a bad team? You've got 4 10-5 teams. 4 teams in this conference that have 10 wins and 5 losses. And West Virginia is one of them. The NFL playoff picture is locked in, and my go-to place for wild card round action is DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off the road to Super Bowl 57, new customers can bet just $5 and get 200 in free bets instantly. Plus, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat bet each day of the wild card round this weekend. Just place any NFL bet of your choice, and if it loses, you'll get a free bet back up to $10. Action's so good, why bet NFL playoffs anywhere else? I mean, Kansas City was doing Ring Around the Rosie today. Will they do that in the playoffs? Can you bet if the Kansas City Chiefs is going to do a Ring Around the Rosie play? I'll look for it on DraftKings Sportsbook. I wouldn't put it past them. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code TBPN. New customers can bet $5 on the NFL and get 200 in free bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code TBPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Where does West Virginia go from here? The offense is not what it was. It still seems like a lot of standing. The rebounding that looked good in the first two games on the road did not look good this evening. Kansas was just out hustling West Virginia for balls. And, Eric Stevenson did not have it. Eric Stevenson, he shot a lot and he didn't make a lot. Like, he shot a lot of times, made very few, continued to shoot, and they were tough shots. But even the shots that were easier, he was having a rough go. We all saw that shot. He missed a bad shot, somehow got the ball again 2 feet from the basket and shot it like I would have shot it when I was 11 in Biddy League basketball. Super nervous because there was 20 people in the stands, including my parents, and just ricocheted off the backboard. Eric Stevenson shot a nervous Josh Witt shot when he was 11 in Biddy League basketball. And Eric Stevenson's not in Biddy League basketball. He is a fifth-year senior. This is his final year of eligibility. He apologized for his behavior in the Oklahoma State game on Friday and then cut to tonight. And he was pressing. He was wearing the Grinch KD shoes. He was really not letting the game come to him. He was overdoing it and just kept overdoing it for the whole game. That was not in foul trouble. West Virginia didn't foul a ton this game, so that's something, right? Is that a bright spot for the team? It's a dark place 3 games in to be 0-3 in the conference, because as I talked about on the last podcast, the last time you started 0-3 in the conference, guys got kicked off the team, and I'm not going to tell you how that season ended, because I said I said on the internet that I wouldn't talk about that game anymore. I'm not even going to tell you what I'm talking about. I'm just not going to do it. You know what I'm talking about. 2019. You know what happened. You and I both know. I'm not talking about it. I am kind of talking about it, but I'm not going to give specifics. But if you've ever listened to this podcast, you know I'm talking about it. But I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm talking about it. But that's the last time you started 0-3 in the Big 12. And there's just not – look at the schedule. The next game, home for Baylor. Home team doesn't win in this conference. Then you go to Oklahoma. In theory, that's a chance to win because Oklahoma doesn't win at home, but you don't beat Oklahoma. You're in a rough spot with them. Then 2 more home games against TCU, who lost today, but they've been really impressive and had like one of the longest winning streaks before losing today. Then you play Texas, who has won 2 road games. You play Texas at home, and they win on the road. Then you go to Lubbock. Then you play Auburn at home, and just keep on filling in the blanks. And then you finish – check this out. The last 3 games West Virginia plays are against the 3 teams that are 3-0 in the conference. Before the season, you look at that, and it's like, yeah, Kansas, you know what happens at Kansas, but finish at Iowa State. Maybe you can get that one. Kansas State, predicted 10th. All right. That's not bad. And you don't see a number. I'm looking at the KenPom. You don't see a number lower than 38. There's 350. There's more than that. There's 350 teams in Division I. There's no. It's just really bad. It's just really, really, really bad. And unfortunately, and I'll say it, let's go back. You want to look back at the non-conference schedule where West Virginia only lost to a giant and only lost to Xavier, who hasn't lost a game. West Virginia played them on December 3rd. They haven't lost since. I mean, they didn't lose that one either. The last time they lost was the 2 games in Portland, and then they haven't lost. And they beat UConn, and they beat Villanova at Villanova. Like, they've won some good games. So, but looking at the other teams and looking at the numbers beside their name, Mount St. Mary's 240, Morehead State 289, Portland State 230, Navy 207, Stony Brook 320. So glass half empty person could say, I knew West Virginia was going to do the same thing they did last season because they beat the 320th best team, according to Kim Baum, by 11. And I don't have much for you there. If you glass half full, West Virginia beat a UAB team that's pretty good, but now I'm looking that they've lost 2 in a row. I don't know. What do you want me to say? I don't want to talk into a microphone about this team after watching that game. You're just not that close. Now, you rationalize Kansas is really good. They almost lost at home to Oklahoma State. They had a tough time with Harvard at home. And they dominate you in Morgantown, where they're not – it's not Allen Fieldhouse. It's the West Virginia University Coliseum. I contemplated recording this while taking the dog for a walk, but I did it in here and just talking it out and trying to be positive. And the positive coming out of this game is that I can't imagine Eric Stevenson shooting like that 2 games in a row. Trey Mitchell was quietly solid. And Kobe and Seth Wilson, their minutes are looking better and better and against pretty good competition. Like, I don't hate not that I ever hate the Kobe Johnson and Seth Wilson minutes. I just little concerned at the beginning of the year, and they're getting better. And I feel better about, like, Seth Wilson, the shots that he was making against some of those lesser opponents in non-conference, he's still making crazy shots again. He made some shots against Kansas tonight. Kansas. 0-3 is a terrible spot, and yet the next game, there's still stakes for the next game. Are you a DC person or a Marvel person? You know the difference. DC, Superman, Batman, Catwoman, Robin, DC, Justice League, Zack Snyder. Isn't he in the DC universe? Then you got Marvel, Iron Man, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, love, Captain America, Captain Planet. Is that right? Anyway, if you know the difference between DC and Marvel, then you probably have comic books, and you probably have comic books that you would like to sell to somebody. And that's where Freeman Sports Cards and Collectibles come in. You call them at 304-416-3631 and tell them you've got DC comic books, Marvel comic books, other comic books, and they'll say, yeah, I'll buy them and I'll give you cash money. So comic books, action wrestling figures, sports cards, give them a call, 304-416-3631. Freeman Sports Card and Collectibles. So the next game for WVU is Wednesday, 7 p.m., ESPN Plus. So back-to-back ESPN Plus games. And this one's been circled on the schedule. West Virginia will host the Baylor Bears What we didn't know before the season, because how could we know? But both teams entered this game 0-3 in conference play. Baylor, they lost handily at home or on the road to Iowa State. They lost a nail biter in Waco to TCU, and then they lost their second nail biter in a row to Kansas State tonight. So 2 home losses. I believe the stat is that Scott Drew hasn't been 0-3 since his first year coaching the Baylor Bears in like 2003 or whatever. So both teams, this is a must-win for Baylor. This is a must-win for West Virginia. Baylor has some really good players. They've got Flagler still there, still shooting it like crazy from 3. This team shoots a lot of threes. And so when you watch the first and makes a good number of them. So when you watch the Kansas game tonight and see Kansas make a bunch of threes early, the game plan for Baylor, spoiler alert, is going to be shoot a ton of threes. And Flagler is shooting 48%. And Cryer is shooting 35%. And Bonner's shooting 35%. Now, those numbers don't blow you away, but they just keep shooting them. They shoot a ton of threes. And they, as a team, shoot 36% from 3, which is pretty good across Division I. So they've got experienced guys. They've got Keontae George, which is a really good freshman. He's had some freshman moments, but he's really good. He's 6'4". He looks taller than that. And this is going to be a challenge. Oh, there's this other guy for Baylor. Not as good at 3 as those other guys. He's shooting 23% from 3. Made a big 3 today versus Kansas State to take that game to overtime. Jalen Bridges returns to the Mountain State on Wednesday to play in a building he's played a bunch in in another jersey. So Fairmont's own Jalen Bridges returns to Morgantown in a Baylor Bears uniform, possibly like a neon green uniform. Who's to say? And so both teams need a win. Jalen Bridges homecoming. And there's different things that pop into my mind thinking about what could happen in this game. One of which, it makes me think, and this is not one of the positive ones. Have you seen the TV show Game of Thrones? If you haven't, then turn the podcast off. West Virginia's 10-5. All right. That everybody who hasn't watched Game of Thrones, stop listening. And they probably stopped listening when I was rambling early on in this podcast. Let's be very honest. But that was their warning. So season 2, what is it? Season 2? When did the Red Wedding happen? Or even like towards the end of season 1, where, what happened to Ned? Like, I'm thinking about the bad deaths from Game of Thrones and picturing that as like worst case scenario for West Virginia. Not that it doesn't make sense, but it totally makes sense that it goes like Jalen Bridges with the he has the chance. Picture the scenarios that Jalen Bridges would have if he goes to another school in conference. What would be like top 3 things he could accomplish at Baylor? Now, I'm guessing one of those things is to develop as a player enough to where he could play basketball professionally. Right? That makes the podium. But right up there with his future career in basketball would be to go back to Morgantown, where he did not have nice things to say about the coaching staff when he left. He comes back and has the opportunity to put the nail in the coffin of West Virginia season. And I hate to say that 4 games into an 18-game conference schedule, but I also don't hate that because I know West Virginia's never been 0-4 in conference play or lost 3 in a row in conference play and played in a postseason that matters. It's never happened. And it's not like 3 seasons, it's so many seasons of evidence since Bob Huggins has been the head coach of the Mountaineers. We got a nice sample size to know that 0-4 is trouble. And especially this year, as we talked about earlier, where's the get right game? I don't see it. But this is a opportunity for Jalen Bridges to stand over top of the entire state of West Virginia and like sword in the air, screaming with his foot on the whole state's head. That's what's in play here. I do not want that. And I don't want anybody's foot on anybody's head. I don't wish that for Jalen Bridges. I don't want the roles reversed. And I don't want to speak for Jalen Bridges, but I don't think he minds that description. I think he would love that. He would love to do that. And so that's what you're up against. You can't go 0-4. You're up against no get right games, and you're up against a team coming in who is 0-3 and needs a win. And on top of all of that, you've got a guy with an axe to grind that would love to hold this in his pocket. Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot of pressure. And we'll see what happens on Wednesday night. Will it be a red wedding, or will it just be West Virginia gets in the win column and does a rare thing in the Big 12, win at home? That's it for this episode. It's just I'm not talking that into existence. It's on the table, though, and you know it's on the table. That's it for this episode of Unreasonable Doubt. Listen on all the platforms, or just pick one. Apple Podcasts is a good one. Rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. That's a good thing. Until next time, I'm Josh Witt. This has been Unreasonable Doubt. WVU for the 2022-2023 season. They have 10 wins and they have 5 losses.